All right. Fantastic. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while, the third session tonight. And ever since I had the opportunity to sit down with our next guest, I've been looking forward to the opportunity to share that story and the opportunity to dig more into kind of the work that you're doing, because it's inspiring. It's, I think, when I think of innovation and I think of spaces that need innovation, it is like, towards the top of the list in terms of improving the world we live in and improving society. So I'm here with Kyle Hollins. He's a CEO and founder of, is it Lyrik's Institute or Lyrik's Institution?
Lyrik's Institution.
Lyrik's Institution. So I'm gonna let you introduce yourself a little bit and talk a little bit about your background and what you do with Lyrics. And then we'll kind of go from there. I just got a series of questions and we'll just have a conversation. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're up to, man.
All right. First of all, you have the best introductions. I don't know if you should get paid first for your introductions.
I'm down. I'm down. I mean, I'm
this dude is fire with the introductions, with the handoffs. But again, I'm Kyle Hollins, executive director and founder of the Lyrics Institution. Lyrics Institution is a cognitive behavior-based program. We allow our young adults to master in the creative arts, but so we have a mentor component to our program, but we switched out of the mentorship component because we believe that information sticks longer when they're actually applying the information in real time. So we went ahead and revved up an internship program where our young adults are making $15 an hour, up into the opportunity where they get hired on by corporations that are in Kansas City. Custom Truck One Source is one of our big internship programs. Kids are making $17 to $20 an hour with benefits, with insurance and 401s and stuff like that. So really what we want to do is we wanted to make sure that our young adults have the opportunity to, one, transition into high school, but also be handed off to real organizations and real careers in case they just don't want to go to college. We want kids to go to college to get that post-secondary education. We are all about that, but the reality is every young adult doesn't want to do that. So we don't want to count them out. So that's kind of the work that we do.
And I think the reality is not post-secondary isn't what it used to be in terms of what it means for your future either. The 4-year degree, the 2-year degree doesn't matter as much in a lot of different areas and a lot of different fields. So I appreciate that part of it. But now what you do is not just creating internships. It's not another internship program and so on. You have an underlying premise behind the work you do with Lyrics and an underlying philosophy that is very different than things that at least I've seen in the space. So talk to me a little bit about the cognitive behavioral side of what you do, and how that differentiates the way you're approaching education, the way you're approaching, this space differently than maybe it has been in the past.
For sure. So we serve a population that is that's kind of rooted in poverty, right? The thought process, poverty is not it's not a thing as much as it's a thought process. A lot of times when we hear poverty, we're automatically thinking about income and impoverished areas. But if you sit in Sprint for the 10 years, you have a Sprint complex. You know what I'm saying? There's just.
Oh, I know.
Right. So what happens is, you have generation after generation living in this heightened survival stance. And what happens is we kind of carry that into the workforce, right? So now we're in survival mode. We're in because of the police sirens, because of the broken windows, because of the drug epidemic and things going on. There are so many people that are living at a heightened survival rate that they're not even aware of, right? So what we want to do at Lyrics is we apply the cognitive behavior modification from the neuroplasticity standpoint. Really what that is when you uproot neurological pathways and you kind of change them and you shape them. And for a long time, we believe that once you did something or once you were this thing, you were that. There is no rehabilitation, there is no habilitation, but that's just not the case anymore. There's so many proven statistics that proves that that's not the case. So what we did was we believe that we don't want to put cheese on a cheeseburger, right? We want people to chase education. We want people to chase jobs. We want people to chase opportunity. But if they don't see that opportunity as being there, it's not there. So it goes to the pull yourself up by the bootstrap, right? I'm all for pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, but if you ain't got no boots on, then how you gonna pull yourself up, right? And I think there's so much like schooling, so much time and money being thrown at all these resources, but not enough money and time really spent on the thought process. So what we at Lyrics do is we center in on a thought process. We till the ground and then we fill the ground with seeds like the BXKCs of the world, like the Keystones of the world, like the Customs Trucks of the world, the districts with the recording engineering. So we want to motivate the mind before we put anything in it, because it's like getting a job with no bank account. You know what I mean? It's just like we have the money, but if you don't tell the money what to do, it's going to tell you what to do. So that's kind of what we do.
And so, so let's talk a little bit about your journey. Mm-hmm. So how you got here. So talk to me a little bit about like your lived experience and how you ended up on this path.
Right. So, when I started out, I was like, a lot of times we get stuck in this poverty complex, right? But if we knew we were in poverty complex, we would fight to get out of it, but we don't know that we're in it. So I grew up in the 64130 area code in the 90s, and it was the murder factory. That's what they called it. It was labeled that, and I didn't know it was that. It was just another day in the neighborhood. It was another T-shirt that we wore with another person's face on it, another opportunity to drink on the corner and celebrate somebody's life. You know what I mean? But you really don't know that all this stuff is going on. So growing up in that environment, I had this idea of what manhood was, right? And then I had to figure out what a black man was in this world, right? So my mom is from the inner city. My dad is a country boy. He moved up from Odessa, Missouri to Raytown. So I had a culture shock growing up. I grew up where a thought process told me, it was good to be hard. And then I go out to this suburb, right? And it's completely different, and I spent more time out there. So I was really educated in Raytown, went to Raytown South. But I would go on the summer and on the weekends to my mom's, right? And the black men out there didn't look like the black men down here. They didn't talk like the black men down here. And what happens is when we're in that rebellious stage, those teenage years, we're testing what we learn, right? We're testing against the majority, and the issue is the majority oftentimes wins. And so I didn't look at my dad as the construct of what manhood should be. I looked at everybody else because it was more of them. It was more of the homies. It was more of the OGs and stuff like that. So I chose to follow down that suit. Well, that choice led me to being kicked out the house and dealing with the police and things like that. So I was homeless at 14. I graduated from high school homeless. And when I talk about homeless, a lot of times we say homeless, but I wasn't homeboy homeless. I wasn't like sleeping on nobody's couch because I had a cousin that cared about me or nothing like that. Like, no, I remember walking up to my mom's house, my mom's door, it was snowing outside. So what I was trying to do was I would stay out with the grownups at the parties and stuff like that. And then as soon as 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock hit, everybody's dying out going home. Well, I would mosey my way, back to the hood or back to wherever, and I would just find somewhere to sleep that night. So I had about 4 or 5 hours where I had to weather the storm, and then I'll go to school in the morning, and then I'll figure it out from there. Well, one particular morning, man, I'm knocking on the door because it was snowing outside, and I wasn't about to do snow. It was my first snow. Like, nah, I'm not about to sleep out here. Yeah. Right. But she stood on the other side of the door and cried and just would not let me in, and so now I'm dealing with the homeless now, and she wouldn't let me in. So that was the first time I slept in the back of a car. It's wrapped up in a cohort. So not only am I dealing with abandonment, with abandonment complex, I'm also dealing with a homeless complex. So, wrap that up with high level survival, how do you expect me to get out? And I use this analogy all the time. If your arm was cut, it was caught in between two boulders, right? Would you cut through your arm to survive? And everybody's like, yeah. Well, that's what everybody's doing. They're cutting through their arm. I'm sacrificing my kids. I'm sacrificing my future because I want to survive right now. And once you start that journey, it takes a bigger force to knock you off that journey. And I was blessed to be able to run into a probation officer. Man, I got caught in the car with an AK-47, and the probation officer tells me, he says, Kyle, why you got this big old gun? All right, you got this large assault rifle with this 30 round clip on it. Like, it doesn't make sense. You could have had anything. You could have had a 22. You could have did anything, but you got this big old gun in the car. And I'm trying to battle with them. And I'm like, yo, I was going to an after hours. I wanted to feel safe. So his response to me was, Kyle, would you go into a bank knowingly being robbed? I'm like, nah, that's stupid. You know, and he just kind of sits back and he looks at me. And then, you know, I'm not letting him win. It was a white guy. Like, you don't understand my struggle, white man, you know, and all of that. And then he says it again. He says, Kyle, would your mom carry a gun? I'm like, nah, she don't live the life that I live. And he sits back and it's just like that awkward silence, you know. And I knew he had me, but I still had to go home. I still had to go back to the block. I still had to deal with the people that were looking for me. I still had to deal with the police and stuff like that. So what he told me was, he was like, Kyle, I want to introduce you to this cognitive behavior program, but you got to go do this time. So I was sentenced to 10 years on 2 trafficking cases, but there's no drug remand in Missouri. So basically what they're realizing is majority drug dealers are drug users. They just sell drugs to get high, but they're getting cases as if they were kingpins. So they dropped the remand and gave the discretion up to the probation board. So I did 4 months there, fell in love with the idea. I just couldn't figure out why everybody else around me really didn't grasp the idea. The lady asked a question. She says, who's worse, the pedophile or the drug dealer? And my response was, of course, the pedophile. Like, we all know that, right? So she asks a question. She says, well, how many victims does a pedophile have? So, you know, everybody in the class is like 50, 200, you know, and it's just, we were trying to prove our point, but the reality is it's probably in between 7 and 12 before their first incarceration. And that's high, right? And then they asked the question, how many victims does a drug dealer have? And I had to eat in that moment every time that I sold 1 stone, 1 bag, re-up. And then what I had to realize was when they came back and I gave it to them again, I re-victimized them, right? So at that moment, I realized I was a monster and there was no way that I would have seen I was the boogeyman unless somebody else had fought through my justifications and my rationale and my criminal thinking and my thinking theirs. So 2 weeks before the door, I get convicted for, I get indicted on a conspiracy, and I get shipped to the feds, and I was facing 35 years. So my point is, it shouldn't take a state number or a federal number to get that type of help, right? So when I went to the feds, I did an 18-month program there. Fell in love with the cognitive design there, so much so that I ended up working for the program. After working for the program, I took the lead position that gave me access to all the records, all the curriculum, how to develop the curriculum. I organized the teachers' staffing meetings that taught me how to organize the staffing meetings. The invoices, where the books came from, how to develop the books. I turned my situation into college because I wanted to get out so bad. One time I called my daughter and I'm like, yo, hey, how's it going or whatever? And she's boo-hooing on the phone. So I'm asking her mom, like, what's going on? She's like, well, she spent all her day in a buddy room. And I'm like, so what was that about? She's like, well, it's her birthday and like you missed another one. And she's struggling with that. At that moment, I realized I just introduced my daughter to the same cycle I spent the last 3 years trying to get out of. So I switched my mind statement to say, yo, I'm going to do everything I can to get my daughter out. One day I'm walking the track and there's this big John Coffey looking guy, the 8 Mile looking guy, standing next to this little bitty skinny guy as big as my thumb. And he was whining to the skinny guy about not being able to kill his celly. And I just couldn't fathom the idea of somebody whining about that, you know? And at that moment I realized there's 1,100 lyrics in this room, in this facility. You know, we're all trapped in this thought process. From that point on, man, it was just, this is my life work. I'm gonna figure this thing out, man, and I'm gonna figure out how to take it and run it. I got shipped from there to Arizona. It was a low, Safford, Arizona, where I met some blue collar criminals. I'm not gonna lie, right? Guys that ran non-for-profits and big corporations and things like that. And I had already vowed to myself and to my creator, you know, I'm just gonna weaponize my skills for good. I wasn't gonna use them for bad anymore. But they taught me how to navigate the politics of the nonprofit world, building the board governance. They've taught me this phenomenal circular funding model that they use, you know, to use grant dollars to turn grant dollars into earned income. And it was a blessing. I left there in August of 2019. LLC Lyrics in I left there in February 2019. I LLC Lyrics in August of 2019. 2020 we gained our non-for-profit status. I think I invested $1,200 into this program. 2021. At the end of that fiscal year, we had netted $336,000, and this year we're climbing over $500,000, not only in dollars but also in impact. You know what I mean? So
right. So I want to get to the impact in a minute. I want to go back to something you said earlier. You said you fell in love with the program.
Yeah.
What was it about you, or what was it about the program that you fell in love with? Like, what was that moment when you were first experiencing, or when you were in the program, that you thought, like, this is a program that I can actually take as a tool and take and use going forward?
When I had to look at myself. So the program is designed to chew up and spit out your justifications. I guess the reason I ask is oftentimes when people are in programs of like, and whether it's institutionalized or whether it's, even in a scholastic environment, I don't think people see the program for what it is. Oftentimes they feel like what the program is doing to them or what they're learning in the program, but you saw it as an instrument. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. To cut through the justification, I had to look at myself. Like, it exposed me, and I couldn't come up with enough excuses to explain the behavior, right? And because once you move from just making right decisions to effective decisions, like, selling dope is not an effective decision. It's just not. It's not effective. It may make money right now, but like financially on a long scale, that doesn't make sense. You know what I'm saying? And then when you package it and you realize, like, yo, I'm destroying the same community that I'm using to get out. You know what I mean? Like, the construct. So that's when I was like, yo, this is a me thing. Like, I need to swallow this, because I'm a student by nature. I'm a whole nerd. I'm a CNN, C-SPAN type of guy, right? And I'm always putting stuff in me, but it was always intellect. It was never emotional intelligence. It was never deep dive into Kyle and who I am. And I just realized, like, nobody's going to get that. Nobody's going to take time out to have a conversation with your soul, and so from there on, it was like, yo, I'm gonna get as much as I can to make it me. And then once it is in me, then I'm gonna figure out how to get it to other people.
So let's talk about lyrics. You said you saw 1,100 lyrics in there. Yeah. So where did the nomenclature come from? Lyrics, like when you say I saw lyrics, like, right. Help me understand, like, the naming convention.
So and how I named it after my daughter because I had introduced my daughter to the cycle, and I realized, like, everybody was in the cycle. So you're a lyrics, you're a lyrics. So, and I find myself being a father to grown people sometimes, right? And what I mean by that is I say that I give people space to make mistakes. Like, a lot of people don't do that. Like, you got about 6-7 times to mess up with me before it's over with, you know what I mean? But because of the cognitive design and how it worked on me, I know if you knew better, you wouldn't do it. Like, I know if you had every thinking tool that you had and every resource, you would not be in this situation. But if you have these things and you're choosing to do it, that has to be insanity, right? Like, you're choosing to put your hand in the fire, right? And like we got to make sure people are walking around with those tools, by any means necessary. And this is the greatest calling for me. I get a chance to be an executive director with 6 felonies. You know what I'm saying? I get to walk into a high school, like, because we were in the KCPS. I sit on the board of Genesis. You know what I mean? A charter school. Like,
congratulations, by the way. That was part of the draft. The draft. Yeah, congratulations.
That was a big deal. And because because I actually PhD'd in my trauma. Like if I worked at a Sprint for 20 years, I PhD'd in Sprint, so I would go to you to learn Sprint. Even if you didn't get a degree, you have enough time inside of Sprint's ecosystem to be able to actually teach lectures on it, right? Well, I got a PhD in culture. So why am I not teaching culture and climate to people that need to understand culture and climate? So that's what we do. So
let's talk about the impact then. You had to reach a point where that self-reflection, that self-awareness, it was heavy because of all the situation that you were in. Mm-hmm. How do you use what you've got now? How do you use this toolkit to reach these young adults before that moment. So talk a little bit about that. I hate to call it an intervention, but you're kind of stepping into it. Yeah, you're stepping into a preventative kind of situation, or at least in the middle of it before it becomes the situation that you were in. So how do you go about doing that?
So everything we want to do is intervention. What I realized was the information that we had, the clinical information of the cognitive behavior design is so heady. Like, I could talk to you about cultural designs and neuroplasticity and post-decedents and antecedents, and with that, I watched it send people to sleep, But when you tell a person, hey, yo, you stuck in this box because your family, the way that you view your family affects the way that you view your love, the way that your love affects the way that you view loyalty, and the way loyalty affects the way you see trust. Like, when they connect all the dots and they string and they be like, that's why I keep pushing people away. Like, that split second moment, that eureka moment, man, that's it. That's the hook right there, right? Because now what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to go to the root, right? And I love what Rummy says. He says, too often we look in the branches for what we can only find in the root. And that's what the cognitive design does. It holds your hand and takes you right back to the root. Because to fix that is to fix everything else. Once I realize I'm not perfect and I have the ability to make these mistakes and weaponize these mistakes, and that means, like, yo, I'm normal. Right? So I'm just like this next person. And we say that because it sounds like cliche, like, duh, you could be able to do it, but no, it's not. It's not as normal as or common. I don't want to use the word normal, but it's as common as we think. And we see able-bodied people. We see people with that are smart, right? And I want to be very, very clear. The demographic I'm talking about are geniuses. Are literally geniuses. Because if we date this back thousands and thousands of years, the one that knew how to survive was the genius. Not the one that could count. You know what I mean? We might deal with that. But, like, if you can bring food home and you can build a house and you can do shelter and like, you are king. And that's what these people are doing. There is no jumping out the window with $5,000. There is no jumping out the window when the Dow goes down. We're going to get these ramen noodles. We're going to figure this thing out. We're going to figure out how to find a couple family members, and we're going to come together and we're going to make our way out. And people have been doing that for years, and once we weaponize that and say, yo, that holds value, and people understand that it's not demonizing, it's actually liberating. Like, I'm saying, cultural shifts all across the board. Our data even proves it.
It has to go. So it seems to me they would have to go beyond that eureka moment, though. Like, just the realization isn't enough, because there's patterns and habits and things that are, like, instilled in behaviors that even when I know and have the self-awareness to know that I've recognized a deficiency or I've recognized some opportunity to improve myself, there's all these things I have to unlearn or relearn. Mm-hmm. So how does Lyriks go about that process of the habitualization of these new patterns, or what to do about that self-awareness now that you've connected these dots and this is why I do it? Okay, now what? So what's the program look like? What's the process look like?
So once we till the ground, right, and get you to look at yourself, the system starts to work itself. So once you you cut your arm, you don't tell your arm to heal itself. Well, your brain doesn't tell your body that we're going to come up with a solution to stress, right? So once the dissonance or once the struggle of you looking at yourself comes so great, you'll automatically create a solution. What we want to do at Lyriks is once we till that ground and get you to start looking at yourself, we want to start putting those seeds inside, seeds around you, because then the environment, the internship component, right? In our program, we break it down into 7 programs, right? But eventually we want to couple that together. We want to build a school, right? But we want to couple it together because we know once I open your mind up and then I put you into an environment where you have to exercise that, it's the environment that's going to be the teacher. You're going to have to, once I teach you communication and you start dealing with people, you're going to have to use communication. Once I teach you emotional intelligence and you go into the workforce, you're definitely going to, you're already using it. You're just not aware that you're using it. Right. And a lot of times we're applying a low level of emotional intelligence, thinking that we're using a high level until you're introduced to new information. So to answer your question, we till the ground, right? We till the ground and then we plant the seed and then cultivate the seed around it to let the process run its course. We want to teach people to think about their thinking, right? Because once you cross over into criminality, you can't cross back over into out of it. You will always know that is there, right? The first time you speed, you now know I have the ability to speed and not get caught.
Right.
right? It's there, you know? So like, what do you use to not get caught? Well, you use reinforcers like the police may be over here, right? You might get into a wreck that might cause extinction. You'll never use that negative thought process again. There's just like, we all rationally do this, but when we're in poverty, the survival skills they're just so much higher than what people think.
Yeah,
they're
they
just
take
so
over everything.
much. Yeah,
right?
Like I'm telling you, will cut your arm off to survive. Like that is a real thing. And we look at the bloody, gory arm hanging off and as if like, no, that like, let's not ever go there. But we never look at the kid that doesn't get an opportunity to be with his mom because she works 2 jobs and works a part-time job, you know, and grows up without her because she's trying to put food on the table as the bloody arm. That is a bloody arm because now the emotional intelligence that she has learned over those years, she can't teach that because it takes time. So guess who's teaching that? TikTok. The TV, you know, family, friends, and all of that. And so we see this able-bodied person assuming because they can solve 1 and 2 that they can solve 5 and 6, and that's not the case. And then they're doing all this time because we think that we're trying to rehabilitate them. And honestly, rehabilitation is returning someone back to what they were.
Right.
Like the goal is to habilitate, to return them to something they never were. And we just don't spend a lot of time in that place because we just keep assuming people know EFG when they don't know ABC.
When you and I first sat down and we're having this conversation, understanding the program, understanding, you know, the tilling the ground and then replacing it or putting those things in place that then became positive influencers or positive reinforcers of those, you know, that behavioral track that you want people to be on. Mm-hmm. You said something that just kind of blew my mind because then it's, all right, so how do you translate this into our current education system? Right. Like how do you reframe our education system and where is the opportunity to do that? And the vision that you have for that, I think was kind of mind blowing for me. So talk to me a little bit about, so you've got the programs, you've got what you're doing with Lyrics, but you see a larger opportunity to actually embed this into how we're actually doing education in these communities. So talk about that.
So we have 7 programs. One of them is called our interventions. It's our school-wide intervention. So what we do is we go in and we affect the culture and the climate of the whole school, right? So we'll work with the administration, we'll work with the teachers, we'll work with the students, we'll work with the janitors, we'll work with the cooks, and you know, because all of them play a major part because you never really know who's building a relationship with who, right? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that the teachers are in their classrooms, in their normal states, in their one-on-one conversations are working the behavior model, right? Or building relationships with these young adults. What we have learned in the last 5 years really is been, there's so many educators that have been doing this, right? But it's kind of just been public that before you can ever teach anything, you first have to build the relationship. Our demographic is different because we come from a relational standpoint. So what we do is we go in and we assess the needs. And then once we find out what the needs are, we come up with a strategic plan that goes in, whether that is dealing with fights, whether that's dealing with teachers that are struggling with young adults. We go in and do classroom resets. We do culture and climate resets. We put a fundraiser in Northeast High School, right? Because so the bureaucracy of the district is it has to go through like 6 or 7 different channels before they can get $400 to buy some t-shirts, right? So we became the booster club for them, right? So like now we're the intermediary. We become the school add value. What do you need? Like what is the need and how do we address it? In everything we do, we attach the behavior modification. So we're looking for reasons to attach the behavior modification. It doesn't matter what it is. If you want to scuba dive instructor, you need to go through a Lyrik certification class, right? Because we want so much from our young adults. And so it's like, imagine this, right? Imagine I tell you that it's about to rain and it's never rained before, but I need you to build a boat. I give you all the materials that you need to build the boat, right? The rain comes, you go to building a boat, but you never built a boat before. What's the probability of that boat floating?
Zero.
Yeah, right?
But that's unlucky.
But that's what we're doing.
Right.
You know, that's what we're doing. And so that's what we're going in to do the work that we want to do, right? So what we did was we engrafted. We're trying to figure out where are the most at-risk young adults, right? So what we did was we went into Northeast and we took over ISS, right? So kids that go to ISS, we snatch them out of there. We run the behavior modification component with them. We have these adult thinking strategy sheets, and then we pair them with a culture coach, and they do one-on-ones. That one-on-one is going to tell me what's going on at home. That one-on-one is going to tell me about culture in the school. That's going to tell me about what teacher. And then we go directly in and start reworking those thought processes with those young adults. So we have three culture coaches that are now working in Northeast. I'm training Boston Uncornered's team. There's a organization that came from Boston that are working with ex-gang members to impact communities, right? So I'm training them with the cultural design that they can impact their people, but I'm gonna take them too and say, hey, like I need you in these schools to apply the same method, to have these one-on-ones, because it's nothing like a person saying, yo, I've been through the exact same thing that you've been through. And not on no fairy tale type stuff. Like, no. I know what it's like. I lost my mom when I was in 7th grade, and my dad was using drugs too. I know exactly what that is. And the best example I always give, and it's always, and I know my team just heard it today, but Gandhi, right? A woman goes to Gandhi and says, Gandhi, I want you to tell my son to stop eating sugar. So she's like, okay, give me 3 months. And I'll come back and I'll tell your son to stop eating the sugar. The woman's like, you're Gandhi. Tell him to stop eating sugar. You know what I mean? And he's like, nah, give me 3 months. So 3 months go by. She brings him back. Gandhi has the conversation with him. And the boy leaves for another month, comes back. The mom's like, he stopped eating sugar. Like, Gandhi, why couldn't you just tell him all this before? We could have saved 4 months. He's like, I had to stop eating sugar. Right? I had to know what the cravings were like. I had to know what it was like not to have the cake in my hand and have to stare at it for 20 minutes before I was like, you know what I mean? I had to know what the guilt felt like, right? That's the work we got to do, right? Like that's the intentional work, and it takes time. There's no quick fix to this, right? Like it takes the school year to do it. You know, there's two types of parents. There's a parent that brings their kid to school on a Saturday, and there's a parent that doesn't. We want the kids that don't come to school on Saturday because mom has to go to work and they don't care, you know? And there's a bunch of them. I got kids that sleep in the back of ice cream trucks. Last year, we raised $1,100 for a kid that got shot through the eye. You know what I mean? She got shot in the head, you know, his senior year. No, he graduated and he's in Iowa because he felt like, because he learned, you know, maybe this isn't the best environment for me. Like I want to go somewhere and have a chance at life. Most kids get shot and stay.
I think it's so, we take for granted that the learning process is so relational, to your point, you know, that it's the relationships that, you know, and I think back on my education and I think about the relationships I had with teachers, you know, or the ability to relate to the teacher, whether I had a relationship or not, but the ability to relate, and that was a pathway for the learning. And I think we get so focused on it's the books and the memorization and the tests and it's what you learn versus the process of learning.
Right.
So I got to ask you, and you probably knew this was coming, Medici effect. So yeah, so we had a session about that. Craig and I had an opportunity to sit up here and talk about that at one time. So how did you hear about it? Mm-hmm. And how did it impact how you think about things in general?
So I was introduced to the Medici effect from Craig from BX KC. He was like, I got a mentor, man. He told me to read this book, bro. Read the book. So I'm looking at the book. I'm like, all right, cool. So I really like Craig, right? Like I respect Craig as a business owner, right? Yeah. So if Craig tells me to read a book, because not too many people are like, read this book. You know what I mean? They might be like, read this blog or go check out this podcast. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But they're like, hey, read this book. And he's like, it's really going to help with your board. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to deal with my board right now, but I'm going to take this book. So I took the book and I opened it up, man. And the story about this would set me off. The story about the guy that worked inside the Swedish restaurant. And once I read that how everything that he had been through in life had designed him for that, I was off and running. Robert Greene wrote a book called Mastery. And it's kind of on the same kind of cuffs, right? And it elevated the way that I looked at the work that I was doing, right? To the point where I actually created my internships program. I did Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but I did it from a cultural standpoint. So instead of, time has changed. I think people really need to understand how impactful the crack epidemic was on poverty. I think sometimes we kind of get away from that. But at the base level, now it's, so who do you want to get out of poverty? Who are you going to do it for? Right? Like that is the base. Like I don't care about a home when my family's bad. Like my daughter will choose poverty because she wants to get her mama out to stay with me in standard living. You know what I'm saying? The construct is now changed, right? So what I'm noticing is what is going to make these people that come from poverty, because I remember I'm telling you that they're geniuses, right? I feel like they have these great skills. I learned how to manage my team from selling dope, right? Like nobody knew Kyle would be running a non-for-profit, you know what I'm saying? Because he was a drug dealer, you know? And we say that all the time, but we never actually intentionally create the Medici effect. And we just kind of circumstantially do the Medici effect. No. On that pyramid that I created, it's intentional. I need you to do multiple jobs before you get to your career. At the top is their passion, right? Not career. Right. What is your passion? What would you do if you never got paid, right? And in the middle is, so what would you do? Where the Medici component comes in is, give me 3 jobs that is in the career that you want to do that's connected to your passion. And then give me three jobs that you just want to do because this is the thing that you want to do. And what I do is I force them to converge all of them towards, so say you got a person that wants to be an architect, but I really, really love shoes. Let's figure out how those things connect, right? Oh, they connect because it's a design, it's a new craft. Do you have to talk to people when you sell shoes? Yeah, so you have to do a SWOT analysis to figure out what's going on. Like we find where those pieces connect and give, because what young adults or what people from this demographic believe is, I don't have to wear a suit to be rich no more. I can have tattoos all over my face and gold slugs in my mouth and be a millionaire, right? Mm-hmm. So what am I bringing to the industry that was never there? And a lot of times we try to fit the construct of the industry first before we figure out like what makes me special. So that was one of the biggest pieces for me about the Medici effect, because innovation lives in the unknown. And I love what Robert Greene does too. He says you can have 2 firefighters go for the same job, but the construct, the cultural design of each firefighter will determine the type of firefighter that he will be. So your life is the fingerprint to your career, right? Like they use the example of the nurse that did the nonviolent stuff like that. If she never went through that trauma in that surgery room, she would have never created that, right, that plan, that strategy, you know? So, one of the key terms that we use in our program is called weaponizing your trauma. And that's engrafting your purpose, your reason into the field that you're in. I mean, if I want to sell cheeseburgers, I can sell cheeseburgers with passion. You know what I mean? We see what happened with McDonald's, right? What happens when innovation, when 2 totally different ideas come together and converge. So
right. You asked me at the beginning of this, or you made a comment at the beginning of this about my introductions. And I got to tell you, man, people like you, I don't run into them very often, but you make it really easy to introduce you in the way that I do, because I believe in what you're doing. Your passion, your authenticity about what you're doing is obvious and clear. It's really easy to want to help and want to kind of help promote what you're doing. So thank you for what you're doing. Thanks for spending some time talking about it. I really appreciate it.
Where's your keystone? Because this Yahoo got a story too. You know what I mean? If he got up here and told his, he'd be like, all right, I'm not gonna cry. I got this.
No, I'll be honest, guys. Y'all can go home. We're just gonna sit here and talk for a while.
That's how we got stuck the first time.
Yeah, we're gonna be here for another hour or so you can turn the cameras off. We're just gonna sit and chit chat for a while. So again, man, thanks. And as you progress, we come back
Yeah,
come back and talk about like the milestones that I know you've got in front of you and some of the things you're going to be doing.
For sure, man.
Awesome, man.
For sure.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
For sure.